Whenever you guys are ready, let's start.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Belfiori. I'm the administrator with VLAWMO, Vadnais Lake Area Water Management Organization. Very excited to see a lot of people online, familiar faces and names. So wonderful to have you with us this morning. We're very excited to present to you the Lambert Lake Regional Water Quality Project. With me today is Don Tanner, who's the program manager also with VLAWMO, and then Emily Jennings with S.E.H, who is the project engineer. Next slide. So some of you may not be familiar with VLAWMO. It's located in the Northeast Metro, North Central portion of Ramsey County. It's about 24 square miles, includes the cities of Vadnais Heights, White Bear Lake, North Oaks, Gem Lake, and Lino Lakes, as well as White Bear Township. The key priority for the Lambert Lake subwatershed, as you can see, that's located in the brown part, about the lower third of our watershed. It's called the Lambert Creek subwatershed. And really the priority for this entire management area is drinking water. The star that you see there is East Vadnais Lake. It is the reservoir that the St. Paul Water Utility draws their water out of for drinking water for 450,000 people in the St. Paul Water Utility area. And because of that, we've really worked over the last several decades to do multiple high impact regional projects, including multiple reservoirs that we will show you in a few slides, as well as other rain gardens, other treatments in an innovative way related to shoreline and stream banks. Lambert Lake project was a multi-purpose partnership project, including partners, including the city of Vadnais Heights, SEH Engineering, University of Minnesota, Pollution Control Agency, Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and St. Paul Water Utility. The project location you can see on this arrow is about a quarter square mile lake called Lambert Lake. It's the last stop about a mile away from that East Vadnais Lake, and is really a creek that is also a ditch. So we have not only a creek, but we're managing it as Ramsey County Ditch 14 as well. We've got huge floodplain areas in this location, as well as a drainage, need to manage it as a drainage ditch, and of course as a water quality opportunity as well. Next slide. You can see this is really the last, the key storyline for this project is this is the last stop for a multi-purpose regional project before the water is discharged to East Vadnais Lake for drinking water. The creek is impaired for bacteria and also has very high nutrient loads. And we knew through multiple regional planning over the last several decades that this was the last stop for treating water before it got to that reservoir. And we really needed to attempt to do a project that treated the water quality, managed the floodplain, provided drainage for the upstream residents. And that's what we're so excited to share with you today. So now Dawn is going to talk about some of the project planning design, and then Emily will talk about implementation, and I'll come back to wrap it up at the end. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dawn Tanner. It's a pleasure to be here and to get to share this project with you today. Thanks, Phil, for the introduction. The focus of our presentation today is in four main parts. First, we set the stage for the current suite of projects. The current projects were possible because of a tremendous amount of legwork and previous improvements, and we want to emphasize the work that brought us to our current projects to date. Our current projects includes the suite of projects that Phil mentioned. It's a sheet pile improvement project and replacement that Emily will also talk about in more detail, meander construction and floodplain reconnection, and an upcoming biochar filter to work to address our bacteria impairment on the creek. Second, we discussed the specific preparation steps that were done to enhance the current project success. There were quite a few of those. Then we discussed the recently completed implementation and construction, and close with an emphasis on a few key takeaways that we have taken away from this project. So we begin by setting the stage. Past efforts have consisted of numerous projects with many partners. An important and consistent partner on these projects has been the St. Paul Regional Water Services. Past efforts include construction of a chain of weirs on the creek starting in 1993. Part of that project network included building flumes at 4 key locations to measure flow manually on the creek at that time. And those projects also included building a stormwater pond at Lambert Lake that you see on this illustration and realigning the ditch in 2005. The project in 2005 helped to pave the way for our current project because it included the purchase of 5 perpetual easements on private property for ongoing maintenance of stormwater infrastructure and utilized the 40-acre City of Vadnais Heights owned parcel that's labeled 0 on this slide from the Ramsey County property map. It also established permitting that facilitated permits for this round of projects at the site. Numerous studies have been done in the past to help inform our current management strategies. Going back to 1991, there was a very detailed sediment stratigraphy study done on the creek. A TMDL was completed in 2013 with a focus on the bacteria impairment. A ditch repair report was completed in 2018, identifying key areas of needed maintenance that we've been working on in the watershed. And a bacterial source identification study was conducted from 2014 to 2017, with a final report completed in 2020. The bacteria identification study had 2 main components. The first was in 2014 and 2015, focusing on dry weather conditions. The creek was not found to be exceeding standards during dry weather. In 2016 and 2017, wet weather was the focus, and that's when we did see exceedance of standards, especially in the first flush of storm events. So that's a real focus for us as we look at the biochar filter. This study also looked at identification of the bacterial source, and it was found to be avian, which helps to inform our strategies as opposed to pet waste or human waste that were also possibilities that were investigated. That report highlighted some of the projects that have been completed already to help improve the creek, and the full report is available on our website, or you could contact us for it if you'd like to receive a copy. We'd be happy to provide that for you. In addition to looking at studies along the creek, infrastructure maintenance has been an important focus for us. One of those infrastructure needs began for us in 2018. We visited the Lambert Lake site with contractors to look at a sheet pile wall. You see the vinyl sheet pile in the photo at the top right on this slide. That sheet pile should be vertical up and down instead of leaning into the pond. When the sheet pile wall was installed, it was only installed 14 feet deep, and it was also at its expected lifespan. So this was an infrastructure replacement need for us. When we looked at it in 2018 with the contractor, they gave us 2 years before they thought replacement would be imperative. So we got to work. We met with University of Minnesota researchers to expand upon the infrastructure replacement that we knew we needed, and to ask them to help us identify innovative site-appropriate BMPs that could be constructed along with the replacement. We also applied for grant funds for the new BMPs that included the Meander and the biochar filter, and we applied for a 0% interest loan for the sheet pile replacement because maintenance needs were not grant eligible. We were awarded our funding in late 2019. With our funding in place, we continued to work on preparation for the project, and that preparation included numerous smaller projects, one of which you see highlighted here. That was the construction and installation of automated flow samplers at the previously existing flume locations. There are 4 of them, and they are identified as the green markers on this slide. We built the automated units with the direction from Limnotech and their support. They've also continued to assist us in helping to keep those running. Data are available real time and go back to the installation. They are available for anyone to download at Monitor My Watershed. There's a crowdsourced website there where you could download the data if you're interested in checking it out. And that's been very helpful for us as well. We worked with the University of Minnesota faculty also to do a winter drone flight with frozen conditions in the wetland area to look for any areas of groundwater upwelling that could destabilize parts of the new meander path if we didn't investigate and identify those first. We conducted wildlife monitoring indicator species for water quality. we conducted construction to see how river otters are responding to habitat improvements at the site. That work is highlighted and formed a foundation for our story maps, including a citizen science otter activity reporting map that is allowing us to compile and share otter activity watershed-wide. We worked closely with the excellent engineering team at S.E.H the whole way. Just one small example of a facet of that collaboration was the development of schematics that we could share with stakeholders and especially residents who are unfamiliar with Meander projects. And one of those you see highlighted here, a couple more you'll see in just a moment.
Thank you.
We maintained open and clear communication through our website with regular announcements. We held a remote stakeholder meeting as a COVID adaptation, and we also posted monthly project updates so we could be very communicative with our residents that way. We had some nice foundation information in place for permitting, but the project was different enough from the previous work that we needed a new environmental assessment worksheet. We worked closely with DNR to be able to do that, and we really appreciated the help from the great professionals there. We had COVID challenges because at that time site visits were not being allowed. So we worked to handle that remotely by photographing habitat conditions and working closely with DNR staff to help conduct our EAW and evaluate any accommodations needed for species of concern remotely. We detected invasive Phragmites on the edge of the project area in a resident's backyard as part of our checks leading up to the construction. We worked with partners, including the University of Minnesota and Ramsey County, to report the infestation that was treated this fall. This is especially important because this Phragmites infestation is right on the edge of the wetland complex that has extensive stands of native Phragmites. So it was very important that we address this while it was still small and easy to treat. We worked with SEH to plan and convene a required pre-bid meeting for our construction so that any contractors submitting bids had to have visited the site and also submitted example projects showing that they had experience working in fragile wetland habitats and completing similar projects. And at this point, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Emily, who will talk more about the sheet pile replacement preparation, the Meander design, and implementation and construction.
Good morning, everybody. Another important piece for project preparation was understanding the site soils. We did have some knowledge of the site soils based on some previous project soil exploration that had occurred, but we knew we needed to know more specifically along that proposed sheet pile alignment. That alignment is shown in that bottom left image with that linear red line. So this particular site, though, it did have some challenges, particularly for access for a standard drill rig. We also knew that the soil data we needed was fairly deep into the ground. So because of this, we opted to use resistivity instead of soil borings. Soil resistivity is a measure of how much soil resists or conducts electric current. So it allows us to discern different soil types due to the characteristics that these soils exhibit when they're subjected to that electrical current. So resistivity is applied. Essentially, there's a kind of a mesh network that's created over the study area, and that gives us the really detailed information along that proposed alignment. So the data that came out of the resistivity, just a schematic showing that, is that colorful image you see there in the bottom right. Those different colors correspond to different soil characteristics based on that electrical current. So with this information, we were able to design the sheet pile wall to the greatest depth that we need, which was 32 feet deep. So in comparison, again, the existing wall, or excuse me, the pre-project wall was 14 feet deep. But our proposed wall was 32 feet deep at its deepest point. So quite a bit of difference there. So we were able to find areas that it wasn't necessary to go that deep. And you can see that in the top right image there with the red line that kind of zigzags up and down. That is actually the bottom of the new sheet pile wall. So you can see how we were able to optimize material use and have some cost savings. Next slide, please. Thank you. So with all the project preparation work that was put in, we were ready to get started with our design. So our design, kind of the first step that we wanted to do was identify an alignment, a preliminary alignment location. And there were a couple pre-project alignments out there that I just like to point out. So the first of them is shown in that graphic there with the purple dashed line. That was the active pre-project creek alignment. And then you can also see a linear red dashed line. So we call that the abandoned county ditch that existed prior to the storm sewer network and the Lambert Lake Pond. However, it is quite linear and straight, so we don't believe that that is the historic alignment of Lambert Creek. Unfortunately, though, we were not able to identify what that historic alignment was. We just couldn't find enough historical data or imagery to, to really support what that alignment was, but we really don't think it was that straight line. So kind of based on all the data and this information, and really one of our important design goals here was for this new alignment to really effectively utilize the vast floodplain that exists within Lambert Lake. But we really need to maintain the hydraulics of the ditch system, including the branch ditch. The branch ditch, can you go back one for me, Don? Thank you. The branch ditch is not shown in this graphic, but it entered that pre-project active ditch alignment, that purple dashed line in the top left, right as the ditch sort of goes from west to south. So we settled on, we ended up settling on, this alignment area somewhere between that purple and red dashed line. We knew our meander alignment was going to fall somewhere in there. Next slide, please. Another really important piece for meander design was to identify a cross section for the proposed meander. Again, one of our big design goals here was to connect this system to that floodplain. However, we needed to be very sensitive to upstream flooding concerns that not only existed on the main stem, but also that branch ditch that I just talked about. So really any reduction in capacity in any way needed to be evaluated very closely. So to get a really good understanding of the flow characteristics of Lambert Creek, we visited the creek at several locations, both up and downstream of our project area, got a good understanding of the drainage characteristics and really how they change as that drainage area increases. So using the alignment and cross-section data that we gathered, we were able to put it all together using Dave Roskin's applied river morphology guidance. So you can see the image on this slide here shows a really nice schematic showing how you can apply your watershed characteristics, your cross-sectional view, and your plan view or your alignment, sort of put it all together to find, an appropriate stream type. So the stream type that we settled on based on all of our data is a stream type E. So you can see that a little bit farther there on the right side of the graphic. And you can see that it's got a smaller cross section and it's really curvy with that plan view of the meander. However, we did not, like I mentioned earlier, we didn't have that historic ditch alignment information that we needed. So we needed to further justify our design with a reference reach. So a reference reach was us finding a similar conveyance with those same characteristics to kind of justify that design. So we actually looked at 2 reference reaches for this project. The first of them being on the left, the image on the left, Rice Creek, located at County Road J. This is located sort of right at the boundary of Circle Pines, Blaine, and Shoreview in the North Metro, a little bit west of our project area. And the second reference reach that we looked at was the Sunrise River and its tributaries. This is located in the Stacy, Chisago City area, which is located north of the Metro, so north of our project area. We also justified our design using the DNR regional curves. So I know the data on this slide is very small, so don't strain your eyes too hard to try to make sense of it. But I think the key takeaways here is that our data points, which are pointed out there in orange and yellow, correspond to those curves set by the DNR. So that helped us further justify that design. And our outcome was a meander and an alignment and cross section you can see here in the schematic. So as you can see, the proposed meander is falling right in between those pre-project alignments, and it also is showing those characteristics of that stream type E. And here's a second graphic, which just shows more of the overall vision, which includes vegetation and habitat. So when we had our design, it was time to put it all together. So we prepared a set of plans. The screenshot of the plans you see here, that's actually our stream alignment plan. And we also prepared a project manual and specifications. The project was awarded for construction in October of 2020. And I think the contractor was really hopeful to begin construction in December. However, December of 2020 was unusually warm. So the weather, we didn't get that good frost that we wanted to sort of minimize our impacts out on site. But the project did eventually get started in January. And then, of course, a good Minnesota winter. We went from one extreme to the next, and we had some more project delays because it was actually too cold. It was well below zero, too cold for the construction professionals and their equipment. But by mid-January, things were well on their way, including the meander construction, where you can see in this image here, as well as the sheet pile work. Oops, can you go back one slide for me, Don? Thank you. So the project, the major excavation and sheet pile activities per the contract were set to be finished by March 1st. So, those early project delays put a little pressure on us, but the reason why we wanted to have that March 1st deadline is because we knew we really only had a short, weather sweet spot where we could get in and get out and really minimize those impacts. So as construction began, we did face a couple early challenges, and those included minimizing our tree impacts. You can see in the graphic here, there's some mature trees that are fairly close to our cross section of the meander. So wherever possible, we tried to maintain the trees. Again, they provided a lot of stability to the banks. They also, they provided a good look for aesthetics and habitat, but they also helped us minimize our construction cost. Some trees ultimately were removed, and we used them for a couple different reasons. One of them being we were able to kind of keep them on site and use them for habitat elements. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, work was really heavy there in January through March. And then after March, the focus with the major earthwork activities done, the focus was really on site stabilization. So just a couple kind of cool key erosion control components that were included in this project. So the first of them being that the bank stabilization actually occurred concurrently with the excavation, and the contractor constructed the meander from upstream to downstream, but they actually left the first like 50 to 100 feet not excavated. So the whole time that they were constructing the meander was not online. So this allowed us to be able to stabilize those banks and perform construction without battling that active flow. And that really helped with the erosion control efforts. Another key restoration piece, like I mentioned, we removed some trees on site. We actually used some removed willows to help with those transition areas and act as like vegetative armor for some of the ditch plugs areas where we are transitioning from those previous pre-project ditch alignments to our new ditch alignment. Another thing you can kind of see in this image here on the left side there is how we incorporated some of those trees. We're able to work around them and keep them in place. And vegetation restoration continued into late April and May, which included the final native seeding, as well as some shrub work that was incorporated into key parts of the meander. By this point, we were into spring, and the meander was online, and access was a lot more difficult. So you can see the shrub contractor got creative with how they got to their project site, using a boat to actually deliver the shrubs. And then last slide I have here before I turn it back over to Don is just a bird's eye glimpse of the project progression. So those top two photos were taken in February of 2021. This was when we were really in the trenches of getting that work done by March 1st. And then in the bottom left, that photo is taken in later March of 2021. You can see we had a ton of stabilization efforts in place at that time, making sure we had a really stable site. And by June of 2021, we had a really beautiful green site. All those stabilization efforts were successful, and everything was functioning as designed.
Yeah, we have a few cumulative slides for you about the results of the project. And in one of those final ones is that the lineal feet of the meander was 2,020 feet with 400 lineal feet of sheet pile. Our estimated load reductions have been done by modeling so far. We'll be doing some field checking of those next year following completion of the biochar filter. We have an estimated phosphorus load reduction of 190 pounds per year and TSS of 3.5 tons per year with the additional benefits of water storage and climate resilience. The project was a combination of grant funds with in-kind contribution and the 0% interest loan. The grant funded portion of the project was about $504,000 and the 0% interest loan for the sheet pile replacement was $400,000. So we're looking at about $1 million project here. With that, I am momentarily going to stop the share. And I'm going to switch over to a video. We have an overview video that has music. So you should hear the music in the background, but there's no talking over it. And you can see the construction of the meander from beginning to end, also including some of the sheet pile work. So I'm going to stop the share there and go back. When we tested this yesterday, using the smaller view on the thumbnail worked better. The video wasn't choppy. So I hope that you're going to see this really clearly. And I'm just going to be quiet for 2 minutes and 54 seconds.
Oh, here comes Grandma. Gotta make room for Grandma.
I don't know about you, but I get chills every time I watch that. Must be that we're so close to it. So I'm going to switch my share back here and turn the presentation back over to Phil for the last couple of slides. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, Dawn. The next steps for this Lambert Lake project is, as Dawn mentioned, we'll do field monitoring this next season and the next few seasons to verify those loads and project outcomes and benefits numerically. The other part of the project that we did not mention that we will be constructing next fall and winter about a mile east of this project is a biochar filter to, again, address some of the bacteria impairment of this creek. And we're looking forward to proceeding with that. So some key takeaways that we mentioned is to have clear communication with partners. We worked really hard in development of websites, open houses, and making sure to have clear upfront proactive communication. We worked really hard because it's a multi-purpose project. We had numerous permitting hurdles. We tried to work as proactively as possible with that. We also had numerous pre-meetings with stakeholders, including on the right, you see a picture of a very well-attended contractor kickoff meeting that was required out on site before the bids took place. So we set a lot of expectations and roles with the stakeholders, with the contractors, with the decision makers, and try to be as communication friendly as possible. Second one is it's a regional planning exercise. We've had about 30 years, as you've heard, of regional planning, believe it or not, to identify that this is really the capstone project or one of the key capstone projects of this entire creek network. And we knew that this was the last stop where we could build a high impact multi-purpose regional project before it hit the East Vadnais Lake and the drinking water supply network for the St. Paul Water Utility. The third takeaway is that, as I mentioned, this is really a multi-purpose project. It involves water quality, water quantity, ditch management, flood management, and wildlife habitat. It really gives us the best bang for the buck and really helped us in this defining in the years before design started, the key engineering and technical studies that we had to conduct, and you heard many of them today. This was not just a design and build type project. We had to do years of engineering and technical work, geotechnical survey, modeling, monitoring, just to name a few. And lastly, we want to thank again the MPCA grant that paid for more than half of this, the 319 grant, as well as the low interest loan network, as well as all the other private and public partners that help fund this. We really tried to build ownership and make this a regional and community-wide effort. With that, if there are any questions, we'd be glad to take any. And again, thank you this morning for joining us.
Jill, this is Jill Kraft, and I have a couple questions.
Oh, shoot, Jill.
How difficult was it to come up with rationale for the state revolving loan fund?
Dawn, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I sure can. Our loan process went very smoothly. When we put forward the proposal for the replacement of sheet pile, we did a description of the project and worked closely with our project officer at PCA, but the process was very smooth for us.
Okay, so I take it the fact that this is a drinking water source was a huge piece of that rationale then.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. The other thing is we're trying to get at Riley Perg, we're trying to get our arms around kind of an ecosystem approach. And I'm just delighted with what you're doing with the wildlife. But what we've been learning in the last few years about soil ecology and how important the whole ecosystem is to water quality. So did you do any benchmarking at all for some of the wildlife and just the habitat metrics or whatever you could capture?
Yes, part of the Monitor My Watershed dashboard includes an area where we can put macroinvertebrate monitoring, and that's a place where we can maintain data collected there. We've been doing macroinvertebrate data collection pre, during, and post-construction, and that will be ongoing into the future. The remote camera monitoring is also informing us about habitat conditions. With the remote camera monitoring, we have one otter latrine site that we're monitoring. So there's a caution there that's fairly anecdotal, but we do have that continuously over the last couple of years. So those are just two ways that we're working on measuring the biological activity out there.
Amazing projects. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Jill.
much.
Don or Emily, there's a couple of questions on the chat that both related to Matt and Mike Eisensee and Matt Koshin both talk about invasive species type things that you can see on there. Do you want to capture or provide any input to that?
I can add a couple notes about just the stabilization effort. So the native vegetation in Lambert Lake is dense, pre-project, the dense native Phragmites there. So, we did anticipate that they would be present again post-project. The last time I walked the meander was October of this year. And again, the site, really good stabilization, but sure enough, those native Phragmites sort of have kind of crept their way back towards the meander. And particularly because we had a drier fall. So I think it allowed even more to kind of make their way towards the meander. I think it's going to be something that's going to have to be monitored in the long term, especially, as we get another growing season out from construction. Things bounce back really, really nicely, but we do expect that they'll sort of continue to develop a few seasons from now, or even just next season. Don, I don't know if you want to add more to that.
Yeah, just a little bit. Thanks, Emily. The native Phragmites is really dense, like Emily said. And the reed canary grass isn't as much of a problem at this particular location. Partly, it's certainly present at the site, but partly because of the seeding efforts that were done in 2004, 2005. We have some nice native sedges out there too, and some flowering forbs. So we've got quite a lot of plant diversity out there that's then being supported by the specific vegetation that was added at this time. Let's see if we have any other questions here. Best mic interruptions this far. Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, this is Maury. Quick question. Did you apply for Lessard Sam's grant? Because you are using, you're changing the straight shot to meander, is that right? So
Yep.
that would provide the NRE benefits. Did you apply for the Lessard Sam's LSOHC grants?
We did not for this project. We've been applying for Conservation Legacy Partners grants for other locations in the watershed. And we also have a partnership with Great River Greening for restoration in Vadnais Park that is using outdoor heritage funds. So we've been using some habitat improvement grants in other locations, but not specific to this project.
Okay, thank you. And the other question that I have is that that's close to $1 million includes the NRE monitoring system as well, or not, before and after the project? NRE, I mean the natural resources like habitat.
That does not include that monitoring.
Can you give me some idea how much does that cost? Because to be honest, actually, the reason is that I'm gonna apply for the LSOHC, the Outdoor Heritage Fund, and for that I'm trying to provide as much information as possible to justify the project, NRE benefits. I was just wondering how much does it cost to get that information?
So far for those monitoring efforts, we have combined them. We've got our monitoring team that's out every 2 weeks during the growing season at our lakes and along the creek. So it's kind of part of that ongoing work, and the specific biological monitoring, the macroinvertebrate work has been done by volunteers, and the remote camera monitoring, we've been doing that also with staff time and coordinating with community engaged learners from the University of Minnesota. So been using some volunteer time and then part of our standard monitoring program. So we don't have it separated out as specific cost.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Emily, do you want to talk about this, how the water and hydraulics related to the stream bank overflow?
Yes, so we do expect the meander to interact with the floodplain during rain events. Ideally it would be in those more frequent rain events, but like I mentioned, we had we really had some constraints with the conveyance to accommodate those upstream flooding concerns. So because of that, we're nestled somewhere in between like a 5 and 10 year event for interaction with the floodplain. Again, ideally, I think we would have been a little more frequent, but we really had to make sure that we weren't causing any flooding concerns. And more so than concerns, I think really making sure we were staying away from the residential properties that exist upstream. So yes, we are expecting that meander to overtop into that wide floodplain that is Lambert Lake.
Any other questions? If not, thank you again. Have a wonderful Friday, and it's good to see everybody.
Thank you.